So now that you've got your perspective heading drawn, hopefully it's correct in terms of the fact that it gets shorter and narrower, and you've worked out the proportion so the lettering is half as wide as it is high. You haven't coloured it yet, but the next stage is for us to try to turn this 1-point perspective drawing into a 2-point perspective drawing. If we look at a couple of examples, firstly, if you look at this example, very good example, he's made the letters three-dimensional and he's understood where the lines finish and end. And he's got his vanishing point somewhere around there. Doesn't quite get full marks because the V looks a little bit too narrow to me. And in addition, when it comes to adding colour, I would say that if he's imagining the lights coming in this direction, the front is obviously a bit darker. The top is quite light. Perhaps he could make the sides a little bit darker. And probably in here, this area would be in shadow. So that section inside these lettering will be darker. Even the side of the letter E there will be darker, so press a bit harder. If we look at one more example, slightly better example, it's actually better not only because he's added more colour, in other words, it's a little bit more advanced because he's made each letter a different colour, but it's also a bit more accurate with the lettering, particularly this V letter there, although he has gone round it with a fine liner. If you look at the width of the S compared to the R and the E, he looks like he's got it more accurate. Again, this person could make the lettering look a bit more three-dimensional, so again, perhaps slightly darker inside to make it get to perhaps a 10 out of 10. But these are two good examples. Before we look at the stages to go through how to improve this and turn this into 2-point perspective, if we look at two more examples. So this is one which doesn't get as secure because although he's attempted to make the letters three-dimensional, there are areas which he's not coloured. So for example, he's coloured the top of the P, but he's not coloured this inside section or the side of the E. Even the fact that some of these lines don't seem to be lining up with the vanishing point. Even got one extra section on the E. Plus, this looks like it's at an angle, isn't it? Rather than perfectly vertical. So this isn't good enough to get a secure. This is better in a way, although the colouring is less good. There's some understanding of the sides of lettering, but if this is the side of the letter E, this is a gap in between the E and the P, so that shouldn't be coloured. Again, that's the side of the letter E. That's a gap in between the P and the E, so that shouldn't have colour either. So it's important to be able to work out which sections of the letters you're drawing and when actually you're not drawing any of the lettering, because these are the gaps in between the lettering. So this is how you're going to turn this into 2-point perspective and make the lettering look truly three-dimensional. So we've put a vanishing point there, about a centimetre from the end. And if you remember, we drew this P 4 centimetres in and then 4 centimetres down. So we'll put extra vanishing point at the side, again about half to a centimetre in from the left-hand side of the page. So now what we need to do, we need to work out which lines go to the vanishing point. So generally it's the corners of the lettering. So if I put these in a little bit darker so you can see them on the video. So if we just do the P first of all. So that gives us the P, but we need to do this inside the P. But when we draw that line, it obviously stops inside the whole of the P. So next we're going to do the E. So there's the letter E. We need to do the side of the E, which of course, when the line hits another letter, it needs to stop. So that's the side. Then this top of this section of the E needs to stop there. And this top of this section of the E needs to stop there. And this there and there is obviously the side of the R. And again, if we do the R, then the inside of the R, then this part of the R, again, you just see the back of this leg of the R there. If we look at the S there, we see the edge of the back of the S there, and then we see inside, then we see the top of that section. That's the top of the S, and this is the side of the P. So that gives us now our four first letters. So if we finish this off, so now we're finished off. If you look, I've had to do some very fine lines close together because obviously the top of the V and the top of the I is a lot narrower than, for example, the top of the C there. So now what we need to do is we need to shorten the lettering so that we don't colour them in right to the back to the vanishing point. So we'll shorten the lettering and then we'll add colour. So for example, what we need to do, we need to decide how deep we want our lettering and keep our ruler vertical. So if we do this one, so the lettering is, let's do it about this deep. And then obviously this line goes to the vanishing point here. So the lettering, as well as getting smaller this way and smaller this way, but it also gets smaller this way too. So it's height and width, because everything gets smaller as it gets into the distance. When we've done that, we then need to colour the work in. So if we imagine this as our darkest area, and we imagine the top very light, I'll just do a couple of lettering, stick to the same colour rather than multiple colours like this one or this one. So we'll make, if the light's coming in this direction, the light will catch the top of the letter, so these will be the lightest. This side will be a little bit darker. And then inside here will be darker still. So the side of that will be in shadow if the light's coming in this direction. Again, that'll be a bit lighter because that's the top of it. It'll be a bit lighter, but not as light as the top. And then the sides of the letter R will be a bit darker, because obviously they'll be a bit darker than this because they're in a bit more shadow. Top will be a bit lighter. In there will be a bit darker. Back of the R, leg of the R will be a bit darker. And again, the side of the S. Notice how I'm trying to do my shading in this direction, whereas when I do the top of the S, I'm going to work more horizontally. And the side of the S there, top of the S. Then finally the very top, bit lighter. So that's how you're going to make it look three-dimensional and use 2-point perspective. Now this person, of course, has gone round the lettering in a Fineliner. He's made a little mistake there, but of course it then would make sense to finish off the work. One tip is when you're doing Fineliner work and you're going over it with a ruler, if you use a ruler upside down, therefore the ruler doesn't touch the paper, and when you pull it away, it's not going to rub against the Fineliner and smudge the work. So now that I've gone round these lettering to make them stand out a little bit more, they look a lot better. Of course, the last thing you would then do is rub out these additional guidelines. You don't need to rub them out completely because they will help show me that you understand which lines go to the vanishing point. So I'm just going to rub them out a little bit lighter. Of course, I've done them a bit darker because I wanted you to see them on the video. So if you now look at this section there, it's looking three-dimensional like the example I showed you earlier. And then it's turning what was a 1-point perspective drawing into 2-point perspective to make the lettering, in this case, truly three-dimensional.